Hello, everyone. Welcome to Noise in the Void Interviews in Art. I'm here today with Alex Shank. Alex is a performer in the art of buhurt. He's been in the sport 1 year. He started with an open event demonstration meet and greet. The demo looked super fun, and he was sold on signing up when he hefted the sword and to shield on the he tried to shield on the table. I'm going to ask you more about that. 6 months in, he got all the gear, custom made to order, has been to a handful of events, and he has more coming this summer. And other hobbies, he likes motorcycling, video games, travel, barbecue, hiking, general outdoors, and plays the guitar. Thank you for being here with us, Alex.
Thanks so much for having me, Emily. Great to be here.
So tell us more about the art and sport of buhurt.
Okay, so buhurt, it's mostly more easy to describe as like a medieval armored combat kind of thing. Often called like a medieval MMA. Is kind of the hip way to describe it, and it is kind of what it sounds like. You put on 70-ish pounds of steel armor. Helmet, sword, shield, chest plate, right down to the boots, and you just beat the crap out of your friends. Is kind of all there is to it. Of course, different rule sets and styles. Whether it's a 1v1 or a 3v3 or a 5v5 are the most common. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. It was based off of like a historical reenactment kind of style of combat. So a little bit of entertainment show value there, and but full contact, full violence. You're there to really beat each other up and have a great time.
Now, do you hold back for certain audiences? Like you'll do certain moves if it's a mostly children audience, or do you just go for it no matter what?
um, it's really easy to get a little bit overboard. It really depends on the context. Of course, like in a competitive setting, when you're really trying to make the most out of not only your limited energy and your team and the space you have, you want to emphasize being efficient with your movements and not going too crazy, not getting too distracted. But certainly in like an exhibition setting and a performative setting, we'll throw out all the stops. We'll focus on more extravagant strikes. Someone will do a spinning back strike, or some crazy kicks, a Spartan kick, or a Superman leaping punch. We'll try and really ham it up a little bit, so to speak, just to give a little more spectacle. So
Okay, but so they're not staged at all. You just
no.
kind of go up there and do it comes naturally.
Exactly. So, we emphasize like part of the practice and the team based part of this is we do work on striking skills and like cooperative teamwork for all the 3v3s. But certainly in a 1v1 a duel setting, it is just a free for all. You just start wailing and swinging, and last man standing tends to be the winner.
Awesome. Now, one thing we did talk about is whether this is considered art. And I actually agreed with you. This is art because of the performative aspect. Is just you have a lot of learning to do before you can get, I guess, fancy with it. Do you find maybe there's other groups who would see that differently, that they take it a little too seriously, maybe, and that it has to, I don't know how to put this, that they wouldn't have as much fun with it because they're in such a serious headspace with it.
Of course. I mean, it's extremely violent, right? And depending on who you're training with or fighting with, some people are more inclined to really go out and with the intent to hurt someone, and that's really not the sport. That's really not the nature of the sport, in my opinion. This is for fun. You don't want to hurt your teammates. You don't want to hurt your opponents. You want to be able to have other people to fight with and spar with, and another day, right? Like the medieval end of it, we're leaving behind and bringing the entertainment aspect of it to the modern age. That's kind of the way I would intend it, anyways.
Okay. Now we went over this a bit in your biography. What drew you to this activity? What did you see that it just kind of made your eyes sparkle? And tell me about the table.
Okay, so we'll start a little bit. As a child, we did like anything any kid would do in the early '90s and 2000s. You'd beat up your friends and your brother with sticks and garbage can lids, and you'd have a sort of a night style sort of combat in the backyard. And this when I saw there was a posting online for like a sort of demo day, a tryout day for basically medieval armored combat, I got pretty excited. It's exactly what I thought of. I said, "Holy crap!" It's just like the times we would grab little sticks and wooden swords and just go to town. So when I checked it out, it gave me the same feeling. Just to see that. The demonstrations included. I think there was like 6 or 7 people there, all in the full armor. 60, 70 pounds of gear out in the sun, just beating each other up, and it was fantastic to watch. And of course, afterwards, they'd set up a little table. Everyone sort of took their helmets off and got the worst of the heaviest parts of their armor off, and we all had a bit of a social gathering. And on the table, they had everything. Okay, well, here's the helmet I was just wearing, and here's the sword and the shield that we were just fighting with. Anyone who wants to sort of heft that and get a sense, and drum up some interest. And so I did just that. I said, well, let me grab this sword. Oh, geez, wow, ooh, that's got some real weight to it. Okay, pass me that shield. Oh my gosh. Oh, this feels. I feel pretty deadly. I'm feeling pretty lethal with this. Oh my god. Then they said, here, hold still. We'll put this helmet on your head. You know what I mean? So they thunk, and then it's like, oh, okay, this feels like something here. I can't wait to try this for real. Let's, where do I sign up? How do I, what's next? How do I do this? Let's go, right? So that's all it was.
And I want to emphasize there's one thing that you and other members of the Sons have done, because my husband really wants to partake, but he is badly injured in his shoulders and he feels sometimes uncomfortable. But every time he meets up with you guys, you always seem to empower people to show that there isn't one way to do this. So, would you say that if someone feels that they're not good enough, they should always try, because there is a way that the sport can be done by more people than they think can?
Of course, I would certainly say that. Like I'm dealing with a couple of injuries with myself. A bit of a chronic back pain kind of thing. Like I'm not gonna lie, I've got some serious knee and back issues that I just have to sort of manage. And honestly, like having gotten into the sport and tried it out, I'm not finding it to be as limiting as I thought. That was my original fear too. As I said, oh geez, like how does somebody at the age of 36 with knee pain and back pain, be competitive in this? And the reality is, the armor does a lot of work in terms of protecting you in the minute to minute. Your movements are a little bit restricted. You're not. It is possible to get injured. It's a combat sport, but I haven't found it to be as limiting or as difficult to do as I would have thought. Looking at it and watching it. So I would encourage anyone who's sort of on the fence to come and give it a try. We're happy to demonstrate and practice with people and try to get people interested. If it takes, I'm not going to say we can loan out the armor, but people that are serious about joining, come to the practice. We can try out with what's called like a soft kit, which is basically just like a foam padded sword and not necessarily anything super heavy. And get a feel for what you're up against, and maybe those motions might convince somebody that, okay, if I can do this with the soft kit, we'll try with some weight on it and see how it goes. But certainly, anyone interested is encouraged to give it a try. Yeah.
Now, you did say that it's not staged, especially when you're doing 1v1, but when you're, because you're part of a group, do you find that everyone tends towards a certain style of buhurt, or does everyone stick with their original style and so you don't necessarily know what you're coming up against every time you fight someone?
Ah, that's a great question. So there's kind of like two approaches, right? Like, and depending on the competitive or on the rule set you're working in, generally speaking, you've got strikes and you've got grappling. Just like an MMA style, right? You can either be swinging your sword and shield at your opponent, or you can be trying to get them on the ground. And the way the rule sets work is that in a team fight or a pro fight, anyone who's like knocked over, either down on their knees or just on their back, they're out of the fight. And that sort of frees you up for multiple styles of fighting. Some people prefer, getting a big two-handed axe. Of course, most weapons are allowed. So some people go for just pure striking kind of thing, try to get somebody, right in the side and really kind of knock the wind out of them and take them out that way. And some people are much more grappling focused, where they'll even the choice of gear and weapons will be more streamlined around, okay, mobility of my hands and my arms and using an axe axe and a small shield, so you can easily get your hands around somebody and throw them or control their weapon or disarm them. So, great deal of variety in the ways you can tackle the combat, so to speak. And like you said, some people do have favorites, preferred style. Personally, I like to strike. I like to just swing and just hit stuff. It's a satisfying time. But there are some teammates of mine who will so quickly just get right up in your face and helmet to helmet, grill to grill, and just start either tripping you up or throwing you or grabbing you. And it makes for a fun time, especially when you have upwards of 3 or even 5 people doing this at once. It gets pretty entertaining.
How much of it is weapons based and how much of it is hand to hand?
So the way the rule sets work is you always have to have a weapon in hand. So like it's always quote unquote weapons based, but the grappling aspect is still, for example, you've got your mace in your hand, but you'd want to say get that hand at your gauntleted arm around somebody's either arm or around their helmet, and try to either control their movements or even limit their vision, or wrestle them to the ground or pin them or that kind of stuff. And that becomes really important because this is a team-based sport, and in a group fight you generally just want to get somebody on the ground. So by having, for instance, your two hands relatively free, a small shield or a mace, for example, you'd want to just kind of grab somebody and either pin them so your buddy can take a swing at them, or tie up their limbs and just kind of, it's basically a clunkier, heavier steel-clad judo executed. I don't want to say as well as any judo person. I have no real training in that martial art, but it's that kind of style of approach.
So is about over when someone gets knocked down or when someone gets their weapon knocked out?
So if you're disarmed, and again, rule sets vary. If you're disarmed, you can't. You can only take what's called like a defensive action. So you can like raise your arm to block somebody swinging at you, but you can't swing a weapon. You can't swing your fists. You can't do any grabs or grappling until you become rearmed, and that can be done either by retrieving somebody's weapon, taking somebody else's weapon, grabbing a spare weapon. It really like there's all kinds of ways to make that work, and pros and cons to different weapons, right? Like the rules allow you to, for instance, any axe handled weapons or pole arms, you can contact any part of that half, the shaft, and that includes yourself and your opponents. So disarming somebody with an axe is possible. You grab the stick and you take it out of their hands. Swords and bladed weapons are a little bit different. If you have a broadsword, of course these are blunted weapons because we're not trying to kill each other. But the spirit of the sport is that you can't grab a blade and disarm somebody that way. So depending on choice of weapon and choice of your own fighting style, there are some options that are sort of more friendly towards different styles, and some that give you, there's all kinds of options there.
So with the blunted weapons, what would you how many times have you been hurt?
um, Hurt, not a hell of a lot, honestly. I can count. Maybe I want to say maybe 2 times, and of course you're wearing some heavy steel plate, and you've got padding underneath. And there are some parts of your armor that just by nature of design and construction that are not as strong or tough as you'd like. Of course, everyone's worried about blows to the head. The helmet is the heaviest and thickest part on you. Like you can take swings to the head all day. It's not a big deal. It gets noisy in there. It gets distracting. But generally speaking, the only real injuries I've had have been like just the wrong angle right at the sort of joint at the elbow. Just one steel plate just not quite where it needs to be, and that really smarts. And another one sort of like the upper shoulder. Right where your shoulder, your pauldron sort of like overlaps with your helmet. There's a bit of a gap there that if you're not careful, somebody could get. And again, it's all armor fits differently. Some people's fits a little better. Mine's a bit of a secondhand kit, so it's a little bit loosey goosey, but it's still tournament legal. So, but yeah, injuries wise, like that's been it. And it's the worst is like a bruise for a couple days, and you're over it. I've hurt myself worse in the kitchen. Chopping vegetables, for example. So
Well, I'm thinking of, because of the weaponry and the armor, people automatically go towards how violent this must be. But I'm thinking of people I knew who were doing paintball, and every time they'd come home, they were covered in welts. Like
mm,
it,
mhm.
I would, if I could make a conservative guess, that was probably a lot more dangerous in the end than this.
I would say so in terms of like how beat up you get, and I've paintballed a few times too, and like yeah, those projectiles really hurt, and you're not wearing a ton of you're not. It really is a question of protection and armor, right? Of course, your face is covered and your eyes are safe, so like the worst thing can happen is a hell of a bruise, and I would say the same for buhurt, and even less so, honestly. Like in 5 serious fights, I've actually, you know what, the worst injury I got was in training. It just kind of like too. What's funny is the armor sort of restricts your motion, so you can't really hyperextend or do anything too crazy in terms of body mechanics because you're just kind of you're just weighed down too much. So in training, of course, that's not the case. We're using basically t-shirts and padded shields and PVC pipes as weapons. So I had my arms way too high and my shoulder way too far out, and like that got wrenched around and kind of not dislocated, but just kind of sprained. So it is kind of funny that it's a sport that in the steel you're pretty relatively safe. It's all the training and the soft kit and the rolling around that kind of is tends to be the bigger risk, ironically.
So what the I don't want to call it the costuming, but the more decorative aspects of the armor that has more to do with the suns. What is that based on?
Right.
Those colors and I'm not
So
going to ask about the sun, obviously. I think that's the only one I can grab my head around.
yeah. So in terms of like iconography, I mean, just like knights and just like the houses in Game of Thrones, we've all got coats of arms and logos and that sort of stuff. And that's a huge part of it of the sport. Honestly, is being able to choose your style and express yourself through the coat of arms, through decorations. Not only not limited to rather our Sudbury Suns logo, and that was just something that. One of our earlier members designed up and drew up, and we sort of had our first official vote was what do we like as a logo, and the team chose the Suns, which it's pretty striking. Black and gold. It works pretty well. It makes it stands out. But another example of a decoration in the armor and in the sport is our team captain recently bought a commissioned shield, and onto it you have like basically like a Renaissance style like painting worth of art on there. So like a guy on horseback, the horse is rearing up, and it's super dramatic. And of course, he bought this wonderful shield, this beautiful thing, and the first thing he said is, "I can't fight with this. This shield is too nice." Like I would mar the decoration, the paint on this thing. So it's permanently a demo. Showpiece. It's a decorative shield now forever. It's just hanging on the wall. That's it. Even though of course it's constructed and ready to totally beat somebody up with, it's just like this is too pretty. Um, yeah, me personally, like there's a little bit of a sidetrack point. I really want to get like a boar's head style, like red logo, like old school kind of like just like that very what's the word, stencil kind of look and shape, just like a red boar's head. That's kind of what I want. And similarly, everyone else on the team has like, oh yeah, I want to get this on a shield, or this on my tabard, or this on my helmet, and yeah.
I love that. And I can relate a little bit. My mom went and found a handmade journal that was beautiful and it had little details added to it so that I could write, my next great book in it. And I could only write in dollar store books. I can't use this beautiful thing to write.
Saving it. Is this word worthy? Yeah, no, I get that feeling. Yeah, yeah,
So one day I'll have a worthy word and one day your team captain will have a fight where he has to show off.
yeah. That's it. That's it.
So, how do you practice? Do you have to lay down the rules in advance, or because you've all been together for so long doing this that everybody kind of knows what's going to go on in each kind of fight? How does that work?
Okay. Like practice wise, it's a variety, right? Of course, when team was just starting, it was almost exclusively in what's called the soft kit, which is it really is like a LARP style foam wrapped PVC pipe sword, and for shields, it's anything you can get your hands on. I personally favor like a boxing training mitt basically, um, and so we would train and kind of rehearse and practice grappling techniques and fighting sort of strategies and positioning with the soft kit, and that's great because you don't need the kit for once because it's difficult to get your hands on a suit of armor in this day and age. So while everyone's sort of waiting for that gear to get rounded up, we'd emphasize the soft kit training and sort of drill body position, where to strike, how to strike, where to aim for, and also talk through sort of the basic grappling techniques. In terms of what the practice looks like and how it's organized, it really depends. We change it up. Some of it's just pure duels. Okay, everyone focus on strikes and try to make sure that you're landing hits without taking hits. It could be up to the pro fight and grappling. Okay, we're going to be drilling this style of grab, and just like a martial art, you trade out. Somebody's putting up some resistance, but the emphasis is on, okay, how do I learn to do this grab and make sure I have your arm in the right position so that I can hip throw you appropriately, or how can I get around if I'm around behind somebody, what's the most effective way to get them on the ground? Okay, grab them up around sort of the top of the helmet and just kind of yank and push back. So we would definitely like sort of quote unquote drill those maneuvers in the soft kit. And now that more and more people have the steel armor, we're drilling those motions. Of course, and everyone once the armor's on and you feel like swinging at each other, there's nothing stopping you from having a bit of a sparring match, because that's the real fun part of it. But of course, the important thing with the team is to have good communication and good coordination. Once you're in the steel helmet and all this armor, it becomes really hard to sort of see and hear what's going on, and having sort of an idea of what you want to do to exploit somebody if you're behind them, is important, and practicing that, rehearsing that, so it becomes muscle memory is that's what we kind of emphasize.
Because I know someone will ask, what is the difference between buhurt and LARPing?
It's a fair question. The core difference is, LARPing is now. I'm not an expert on either topic, so I don't want to misspeak entirely. But buhurt is, full contact, full violence, no holds barred. You're in that full steel kit specifically so that you can swing as hard as you want and not put somebody at risk. And of course, generally, there's no classes, no spells. The LARPing can include all kinds of role play elements. Like a closer to a D&D campaign. You can have spells and abilities and classes and that kind of stuff. Of course, buhurt is just pure, swinging. Just pure contact. And what you'll see is there's a great deal of overlap. For instance, the LARP gear, or what people would LARP with, is very similar to our soft kit for training. You know what I mean? It's padded for safety, and it's padded such that people in street clothes or just regular shirts don't hurt each other. So we basically do practice in what looks like a LARP gear. Only, of course, we sort of just don't bother with the role play element. You can, of course, you can lean into the medieval aesthetic and speak like a knight and do all these things, and that's a fun thing to do as well. But yeah, the difference is just the amount of armor, the layers of steel on you versus none.
So it has more of a history element than a fantasy element, also.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, and that's actually well put. In terms of the historical like origins of this too, this is pretty similar to what you would have seen in like the 13 1400s as like a tournament. You know what I mean? Like if you have knights around at any sort of festival, any sort of event, they would set up this sort of combat match with rules to make sure that your friendly knights or your knights on the same nation are not killing each other. And this would be hosted sort of like a Roman Colosseum, sort of like any sort of combat, as an entertaining thing for the crowds and dignitaries to sort of watch and be amused by. So this is as close to that as it gets, really.
And one thing I also love about it is it has a great sense of community, not just with the sport itself, which you would need that sense of community, especially with your teammates, to trust them in a fight, but also how you are all going out into the community to expose them to this, to bring them so you have more members. And is that a recent push that you've been doing, or I could have been under a log this whole time too?
no, of course. I mean, like it's a relatively new, pretty new sport. So when we need members to grow and to expand and to build our own inventory of training equipment. So yeah, community engagement is something that we're really trying to emphasize, not only to get ourselves the exposure out there, but also to recruit members and generate interest. that's basically what it boils down to. In terms of the team as a community, a bunch of nice people. Straight up, like these are you have to be a pretty relaxed person to put on a bunch of armor and go beat each other up. And sharing that experience with these people does make for a pretty tight friendship. These are people that you have to trust them because they're swinging swords at you. And you have to trust that they're not out to hurt you, and we're just out to have fun, right?
How do you have that same trust when you're going out to a tournament with another group?
Yeah. Generally speaking, of course, these people are, it's not a big community first. So the people I would see at a local tournament are people I do know just from, online connections. That demo day that sort of got me into the sport, that was hosted and facilitated by the team based in Toronto. And so I've already got some connections with, a good number of their leadership, just to have some coordination, some communication there. They're happy to share training space and meet up anytime anyone's in the neighborhood. It's one of those things. It's like I said, it's not a very big community, so we all got to work together, and we all sort of know each other to some degree. Of course, international. Um, Competitions, notwithstanding, where you would be generally meeting people that are total strangers to yourself, and I would trust that not only the rules and regulations that are in place would keep you pretty safe, but also it's the spirit of the sport. People, there's always bad people out there that want to do you harm, but those kinds of people don't spend this kind of money and this kind of time buying armor and steel weapons. There's faster ways to do somebody harm than to get in the buhurt. So.
I like Toronto, but they have enough stuff. We need to have more stuff here. So I love this.
Exactly. We're happy to have something, something else that they have that's interesting and new and different and exciting. So,
Do you have any role models in the sport?
oh, no famous athletes per se. Like our team captain is a veteran. He's been in the sport for like 8 years, and this person is terrifying in armor. Just like that's if when I grow up, I want to be like this guy. He's always seems to have the right answer, always seems to have the right response in a combat setting. You know, Terrifying to face against, but also one of the nicest guys I've met. You take the helmet off, he's smiling, he's laughing, he's having a good time. And but once the helmet's on, it's like, oh, you better watch out, right? So, yeah.
Do you have any bouts or performances coming up?
We've got a tournament coming up in the middle of June, and that's like a legitimate sanctioned event in what's called Hastings. They have like a medieval style fair there, and sort of attached to that is what's becoming a more increasingly more organized tournament event. And there is one actually this weekend. Outside of Ottawa, I won't be able to go personally. Similar thing. There's like a Renaissance fair at Glengarry. The Suns, I don't think our guys are going to be able to make it, but some of the Toronto folks and some people based out of Montreal are going to be going and having some fights over there. So, and of course, more and more all summer. At least one a month, every couple of weeks, depending on where in Ontario and where in Canada.
Well, as someone who's been able to see, I think about 3 performances now, if you can get out there, please do. It is entertaining and it's heart wrenching at some points where when someone falls and the clang of the armor rings in your ears, and the whole thing is just, it's a full emotional, full body experience, and it's wonderful. Well, Alex, I want to thank you so much for being interviewed with me today. Where can they find the Suns on in I was going to say Instagram, but I should probably just say social media.
Yeah, social media. We do have an Instagram page, but we're more what's the word active on Facebook. So at facebook.com/Sudbury Suns, easiest way to look us up, and Sudbury Armored Combat also on Instagram. So either of those will get you connected with us, and we try and post there and announce where we're going to be and where we're going to fight, and the same full body experience Emily had can be anyone else's to come and watch and maybe participate as well. So.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much. You can find the full length interview on my YouTube channel, Garbage Words with Garbage Lady. And you can listen to Noise in the Void at 96.7 CKLU in Sudbury, either online or on the radio. Thank you very much, and bye bye.
Thanks a lot.